Hi, Vincent Hall Artists. Welcome to another episode of Anyone Can Draw or Paint. Today we're going to be working on drawing, but a lot of what we're going to be doing could easily transfer to painting. So if painting is more your forte or what you prefer to do, feel free to interchange the ideas. Like I promised last week, we were going to move on to animals. We've done a lot with landscape and simple lines. So today we're going to take the idea of simple lines and shapes and turn them into a recognizable animal. I decided to select the portrait of a horse because pretty much everyone can picture what a horse looks like, yet not so many people have had them as pets. Something to think about. Artists tend to find it's easier to draw the things we're not super familiar with. So if you see someone every day, or you have a pet dog or cat or bird, fish, whatever it might be, and you see it all the time, it's actually harder to draw because with our right brain and our left brain kind of gearing in at different times during the creative process, the left brain, which is your analytical side, says, oh, that's Mary or Joe or Paul or whoever it might be as a friend or a relative, and your brain automatically puts in preconceived ideas about what they look like. Same thing if you're drawing Puff the cat or Rover the dog, and you have them in the house all the time, it's harder to do. So by picking an animal that you're familiar with what it is, but not seeing it every day, it forces your right brain to kick in. The right brain is your intuitive side, and that's the side that's going to see not only what the animal is, but more importantly, the shapes and the shadows and the tones that it represents. So if you can draw 3 basic shapes, circle, rectangle, triangle, you can draw a horse. Believe it or not. And stay tuned, because here we go. The first thing we're going to do is just practice drawing the basic shapes. And while I am going to use color pencil for the horse drawing, we're just going to practice with the 3 elements. So if you can draw a circle, a triangle, and a rectangle, even rough like that, you're going to be able to draw a horse. And here's how the basic premise works. The horse's head is based on the fact that their neck is very powerful and wide. So if we draw a triangle, roughly like this, so it's a bit on an angle, and then their jawbone is very powerful. And if I roughly draw a circle where that jawbone is, and then I'm going to draw a rectangle, kind of coming off here, and it goes up here. And then I'm going to extend my triangle out just a little bit so we have ears. And then just sort of connect the top and the bottom of the rectangle. You can see here, hopefully, that we've got the basic outline of a horse. If we added some eyes and erased these interior lines, your brain would recognize it at least as a symbol of a horse. So by starting with that, hopefully we're going to end up with something more like this, which is an actual picture of a horse. So I'm going to walk you through the steps. Shouldn't be too hard. First thing, we're going to plan out our paper. And I switched to gray paper today so there wouldn't be so much of a sheen when I switch to my color pencils. And what we're going to be doing is just simply drawing. If you saw flickers, by the way, my power just flickered. I don't know why. We're having a little bit of a windy day, so I apologize if the lighting got weird here. I'm going to look at the fact that this horse, the head is very big and he's looking more at me. So I'm going to start by just roughing in that rectangle shape that we were looking at earlier, and then go to my circle, roughly where the jaw is, and then my triangle, which is going to base where that first ear is, coming down here. Now I'm going to just go lightly and then kind of cut up like that. So as you can see here, we've got a good basis for the drawing of our horse. Circle for where the jawline is going to be, the rectangle for the snout of the horse, which of course we're going to add to, and then the neck, which is this large triangle on an angle, which leads us to the 1 ear. Now my horse, I'm looking at my drawing, example has 2 ears, so I know I can roughly plan this other triangle in here. So now I have a second triangle. Then I want to figure out, well, where do the eyes go? If I put the eyes down too far, or if I put the eyes up too high, that would look strange. Even more strange would be if the eyes were too close. So we're looking at the distance between where the neck of the horse kind of comes up. So I'm drawing almost like another line, an imaginary line here, here, and then turning this into a square. So if I do this, this, and this, and I'll erase out all these things later. Now, if I just go in the middle of that square, I know where to put my eye, and the middle of the square is right here. So I'm just going to roughly plant my eye in this area. Now, we all know horses' eyes have a little bit more shading, and I'm just getting the rough idea here. So once I have this placed in and I know where my eye is, and this particular view of our horse only shows the bulb of where the other, bulge rather, of where the other eye would be, the occipital bone. So I'm just going to roughly give that in here. And then I'm just going to go down and look at what I see and talk to yourself when you're drawing this. Do horses have a cutoff nose? I sure hope not. So what we notice here is there's almost another taper or another triangle that comes down. We don't want to make it too pointy because that wouldn't look right either. And then the nose is right in the middle of that, or the nostril rather, and another one here. As this comes up, we can see there's a little bit of the jawbone here, and then the neck of the horse. And this eye has a shadow. So I'm going to roughly draw in about where that shadow is. This horse also has his reins on. I'm not going to do the reins. You're welcome to do that if you want, but I don't see the reins as being too important to this drawing. I'd rather get the idea of the horse. And then it's important to see the inside of the horse's ears so we can better get a sense of where his mane's going to go. Okay, so I've got a basic idea of where I want to go with my drawing now. I'm going to switch to colored pencil, and we'll get a chance to see where I'm going to make corrections and how to erase some of this out. Alrighty, so we're going to take this eraser and just get rid of these lines that aren't necessary for the shape of the horse. This was where we drew our basic rectangle, circle, and triangle, and I'm just going to roughly get rid of some of that. It doesn't really matter in the end. A lot of this is going to be colored in with colored pencil anyway. So now that we have the basic idea of where we want our horse, make sure everybody can see both, there we go. I'm going to just start with the colored pencil and a basic tone of what I would like to do. Since I am using gray paper, I might, use a white paper, or excuse me, a white pencil for the highlights. So I know I'm going to select my white pencil, and maybe we'll just do 2 different browns just to keep it pretty simple. With colored pencil, you can use, first of all, there's a lot of different kinds. I prefer Prismacolor, but you're welcome, there we go, Prismacolor. You're welcome to use whichever you happen to have, Crayola, Derwent, Kohinoor, anything you might want to use. There's lots of different brands. Prismacolor is unique in that it has beeswax mixed in with the pencil, so it blends and gives you a very creamy look. Some of the other ones are more colored graphite, so they're going to give you a darker look. But I'm just going to rough in, and I'm following where my shading is and going darker where I see the shading, which is around the eye, and the eye is going to be really dark. And then it's a little darker here under the jaw. I'm just going to keep coming down. There's a lot of dark shadows down here in the bottom. Part of why this looks so strange right now is there's no shading on his nose and mouth area. And I see I'm going to need to make that mouth a little bigger, which I will do. Don't worry if you look at it and it's like, oh no, it's too small or it's too big. Drawings can always be corrected. And there's really no, again, correction, quoting my favorite Bob Ross, just happy little accident so we can play with what we have. And I'm just lightly going in here, just roughing in some of the basic areas where I want it to go. If you start with where you see your darkest area, and the inside of the ear here is darker than the outside on this picture, and every picture might vary. But if you do the darker things first, it's easier to fill it in. Or if you want, you can start with the mid-tones, but try not to draw outlines of everything. Let this kind of take its own natural course with things and start to just shade some of this in. All right, so once I get some of these areas, and you can see I'm going up where there's veins on the horse's nose and mouth area, and then skipping some of the other areas, but these will help give this 3-dimension and some shape. I'm just shading it in here. Then I'm gonna go with my darker brown pencil because the darkest part of this drawing is his eye. And the eye is pretty dark all the way around. And you can see I'm doing short, choppy strokes. So I'll go here, doing this, up, down, the old W, but just closer together. You're welcome to do whatever stroke is easiest for you, but I find if you do kind of this, you can control how light it goes, you can control how dark it goes, and it just makes you feel a little more confident as you're moving around the horse. Now, the horse has a catch light in his eye, so I'm just gonna leave that area gray for now. And now I'm gonna take one color and go over another. If you remember the pastel drawing last week, it was all about taking color over color, and that's the same thing with colored pencil. It just works gorgeously when you start to blend your colors together. This mane does not have any color definition because it's a black and white drawing. So I'm just deciding on my own. It's just going to be a little bit of a darker mane. It also makes it easier for you to see. And as we come up here and go around here, and then we notice this back ear is darker than the front ear by a little bit, and the inside is darker than the outside of the ear. A lot of people think the inside of the ear is lighter because maybe you're used to seeing cards with bunnies on them with those little pink inner ears, but think about what animal you're drawing and be true to that animal. This particular one has darker on the inside, so we'll just kind of go darker here. And that catch light's a little big. Now I see here is a darker shadow even than what I have. So I'm just gonna go back in and go down here to the nose. And you notice I'm not using black. Black is gonna make this too dark. I might use some black at the end just for effect, but for right now, I wanna keep this more natural, and brown and dark browns give this a more natural, lifelike appearance than just going with black. Black tends to flatten things out and deaden it a little bit, and we don't want that when we're drawing a living object. And you can see my pencil's wearing down pretty quickly, so I may have to take a break here and sharpen some of these, but I'm getting the basic idea of the horse in. So let's see here. There's more shadow here, a little more coming down here. And let's see what we have. So here we have the basic of what this horse drawing is going to look like. I'm going to fill in a little bit more, and I'll be right back to show you our next step. So I've spent a little bit of time just filling in the areas that you had already seen me start. So just getting some basic tones in and putting everything in with a light brown. I still have not used my white pencil or my black pencil. And since I'm keeping this horse in a more neutral tone, I'm going to go in now and start to add some of these highlights and super dark shadows and hopefully bring this horse to life a little bit more. Now, of course, I'm using neutrals. You're welcome to try whatever color you want. If you think like you're in the mood for a yellow horse, a red horse, an orange horse, pink horse, blue horse, whatever, they all work. The beauty is you can do anything you want with this to make it your own. What I'm going to do now is actually go with my highlights because we haven't talked about highlights, but when you're using a toned paper like I am, I need a white pencil to show my whites. If you were drawing on white paper, you could just leave the white paper show through and not use a white pencil and you would be fine. But this way it's a little easier to see. So I'm going to look here where I see my highlights and just color this in. And right around the edge of the eye, there's a little bit of a rim highlight here showing his eye lid, the lower lid, and then a little bit of a highlight up here. Now with Prismacolors, white is also going to act like a blender. way back when Prismacolor first came out, before they made their own blenders, which are now called colorless blenders, and they're basically just the wax without a pigment. We used to use the white pencil as a blender. You can also use just a blending tool. I have this blending tortillon. A tortillon has a point on both ends. If it's just pointing on one end, it's called a stump. And you can use that. The Q-tip from last time, all of those things work too. But I'm seeing a highlight here on the eye, so I'm coloring that in. I see this highlight coming right down the nose. Don't be afraid to turn your paper to however your hand feels strongest so that you can get a nice shade coming down the edge of the nose. And then this really beautiful highlight around the edge of his nostril, which is going to help make this look more like a nostril and not just like some sort of little hole stuck on the poor side of the horse. Then talk to yourself. I see a secondary highlight right here, and it comes up here, and then it follows this line all the way up behind this part of the horse. When you start adding these in and talking to yourself, it's more like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Each piece of highlight and shadow connects with something else. So as I'm starting to put these highlights in, hopefully you can see this horse starting to take on a little more dimension and look a little more closer to what we would hopefully have here at the end as the end result. So I'm just filling in where I see some of these highlights, and again, using my white as a blender. Your pencil will wear down pretty quickly, the colored pencils on this, so it's okay to have to go back and sharpen. I see a highlight on the edge of the ear, right here on the edge of this ear, but not on this one. So if you don't see it, don't put it in. That way you're keeping easier track of where you want highlights to go. Okay, let's see what I'm missing here. I'm missing more of a highlight under the eye, and there's another highlight coming down on this side. And there's a little highlight down here at the bottom of the mouth. So if you see it, put it in. Your intuition might be saying that doesn't look right, but the reality is if it's there, let's just try it for now, because again, we're trying to learn how to draw. So before we can become Picasso or somebody else that does things the way they feel like doing them, it's good to know how to do them the way they actually are, and then you can go back and modify. So I've got my highlights in this drawing pretty well, but now I want to go back in and get some really nice dark. So I'm taking my black over where the browns were, and I have to be judicious with this because too much black is going to be overkill, and it's going to give me a very static look, and I don't want that. But I can use this for line definition. You can see here it's helping bring in this tip of this ear is pretty dark up here. There's another little edge on this ear, the way it goes here. Pretty dark shadow up here at the top of the horse mane that comes down between the ears. So you can see, and I'm talking to myself the whole way down, and then the next really dark part is this nostril. So I'm just gonna go in here, and there's a little bit of a darker part under this, the snout here. For lack of a better term, we'll call it the snout. And then this gets darker again in here as well. Usually where things meet, like where this jaw meets the neck, there's a dark shadow. So I'm gonna put that in as well. And then just coming along the edge, and I'm not drawing straight lines. So if you're one of those people that say, I can't draw a straight line, guess what? That means you can draw, because I'm not doing straight lines. I'm doing little jaggedy edge lines. Since I did not put in the horse's, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. What was, since I didn't put in, you know, any of the straps and things around the horse here, I'm just kind of winging where I think the shading would be. That certainly happens sometimes too. You can talk to yourself while you're drawing and lose your train of thought. And that's okay too. Happens to all of us. And I'm just gonna go right in here. And then this catch light, which is that little tiny highlight in the eye, I'm just gonna go back in with some white. So now I could leave this if I want. I think it looks like a horse. I think I'd probably erase this edge so it doesn't look like a cutout horse head. If you leave your drawing, just have a rough edge at the end and it doesn't end evenly, it'll look fine. It'll look like a finished drawing. If you want to blend it in now, would be the time to do that. I'm using a very hard surface paper, so it's not going to blend as easily. If I were using printing paper like this, just your white computer paper, the blending will be a lot easier and you can have probably a much easier time for sure, and probably a much more successful time if you're trying to get nice smooth tones. Notice what I'm doing when I'm blending though. I'm kind of going opposite the direction that I colored. So I'm not going the same direction, I'm going the opposite. So if I came down this way here, I'm just going to blend the opposite direction going up so that I can kind of soften these areas. Just kind of lightly get everything in. If I really want something dark in like this eye, I can just press in completely and then go back around it here and try to get some of these darker areas. As I press in, it should be softening, so you should be able to see a little bit more of this softness along the edge of the horse. And let's see, here we just gotta blend all that in a little bit more. Since we don't, the reins, oh my goodness, I just remembered that what I was saying. You can tell I did not own a horse and I barely rode a horse. If you were in my art class, you probably heard me talk about falling off of Hay Belly. It was my one time that I was on a horse. And yes, the horse's name was Hay Belly because it was a very overweight horse. Let's just say it didn't end well. So for me or the horse, but that's okay. All right. I'm going to call this pretty much done. I might want to zhuzh up the mane a little bit, just get some little hairs coming out on the side. But for the most part, we're going to say that's about it for drawing this horse. We've got the shapes, we've got the tones, and it didn't take very long. So if you can draw a circle, a rectangle, and a triangle, you can draw a horse. It's really not that difficult. As you can see, from one horse to another, all it is drawing the basic shapes, getting the idea down of what you would like to do, using your circle, your rectangle, and your triangle to start, and then connecting those two edges of your triangle to get the rounded part of the horse's mane. This one was a smoother type animal without a lot of soft fur and whiskers and all of those things. Next week, we're going to be looking at how to draw fur. Whole different technique. And for those of you who like those short jabby strokes rather than the coloring in, that lesson will be one of your favorites. If you want to see some really good animal drawings, I would suggest checking out Midge Holmes and Audrey Coles. They have phenomenal drawings. Audrey is especially a horse portrait painter and drawer. She's got some great stuff, so check it out if you get a chance. Meanwhile, stay well, stay safe, and happy Mother's Day to everyone celebrating Mother's Day at Vincent Hall. I look forward to seeing you next week with another edition of Anyone Can Draw or Paint. Take care.